So I did some math on essentially how many iterations would be required to get to 95% complete in this sort of simple communication signal ratio model that I've been playing around with. And I did in Excel, and I'll share that Excel as well so you can change the assumptions and do what you will with it. What it shows is that in the best case, so the best case, which is sort of that CTO level person, if you have a CTO level developer working directly with the customer, so that's like a technical co-founder kind of a situation. So in your best case, you can get real work done in just a couple of iterations. You do iteration number 1, you show it to the customer. Now again, you talk to the customer first. You figure out what they need. Then you do iteration 1. Then you show it to them and you get more feedback, and then you do iteration 2. So you have 2 conversations that you can get to perhaps that 95% line. Again, this is all sort of theoretical, modeled out, but something like that, 2 iterations. What about, if you're adding additional layers with a typical what I'll call well-run team? What are you looking at there? Well, in that case, depending on the particulars, you may be looking at 4 to 6 iterations. There's, and what is that team? That's going to be a case where you've got the developer, you've got a product manager, and then you have either the business, co-founder or business sort of, owner, and then you've got the end customer beyond that. Or maybe if this is sort of a client engagement, you've got the developer and the PM, and then you have the actual client themselves, the SaaS client or whatever that, software client, the client that needs the software, and then their end customer is still behind that. So kind of assuming, again, a B2B case. So 4 to 6 iterations there. What about when the wheels start to fall off? This is a well-run team. What about if you take that same team, so well-run team, but dev with communication problems. All right, so then in this case, this equals, now it explodes upward, and you're in the 20s, something like 22 iterations. So all of a sudden we've gone up, potentially more than 5x from the well-run case. So that's where we end up. And then we've got sort of the worst case scenario, which is offshore team, many layers. So this is an offshore team case where there are many layers between the client or between the end customer and the developer. So in this case, 60 plus iterations. Now, I mentioned this notion of iterations. You could think of this in the following way. Maybe it's one developer, producing we're assuming the technical talent in each case is the same. And so in 2 iterations, you can kind of think of this, somewhat linearly, in the sense that the way that the offshore teams will try to make up for this is they will just throw more manpower at the problem. So that will enable them to maybe try to deliver a lot of slop quickly and then iterate on it and make it a little bit better. And then iterate on it and make it a little bit better. Or what they'll do is they will have a huge team that tries to precisely document everything down to the nines so that they can reduce the risk of missing things, and that documentation process and that process attempts to improve the communication, but at the cost of a very long sort of requirements process in order to get that done. So again, this is the worst case. This is the best case. Reality lies in between. But hopefully what you've seen here through all of this and, through some of the math is that communication, because of these compounding effects, it matters in an absolutely huge way on software development teams. And baseline software development talent, of course, it's a prerequisite to building a software product. But communication oftentimes outweighs the incremental improvements in technical talent in terms of overall productivity. That's what we've seen. And by the way, as Gen AI continues to improve and deliver more and more capabilities, that pushes the needle in favor of communication even further.